Dear Chosen One, first and foremost, I want to take a moment to express my deepest thanks for your incredible support. Whether you've donated through Super Thanks or just showed up to listen, your presence here means everything. Your support, whether financial or through your engagement, helps keep these empowering messages alive. And even if you're just here for the message, know this: I am eternally grateful for you. Thank you for choosing to be here with us, for choosing yourself, and for sharing in this journey. Chosen One, the most dangerous person is the one who walks away with no regrets, because they have nothing left to lose and everything left to gain. They never saw it coming, did they? They laughed when you struggled. They doubted you when you tried. And now they're choking on their own arrogance, watching you walk away while their world crumbles. This isn't just an exit, it's a reckoning. They never thought you'd break free. They believed they had you trapped, locked inside their twisted little game. You were their convenience, their safety net, their endless supply of energy, but they never realized the power you held. Because the Chosen Ones, we don't just leave. We erase our presence so thoroughly they have to face the cold, bitter truth. Without us, they are nothing. They'll call it dramatic. They'll pretend to be shocked. They'll whisper about how you changed, how you turned cold. No, you didn't change. You woke up. You realized that staying wasn't loyalty. It was a slow death. And survival means choosing yourself over the ones who only loved you when they could use you. Here's the ugly truth. Most people don't miss you. They miss what you did for them. It's not love they're grieving. It's their loss of control. The comfort you once gave them is gone, and now they're forced to deal with the emptiness they tried to bury under your sacrifice. But the best part, you didn't leave with anger. You didn't beg. You didn't scream. You just walked out. And that's what haunts them the most, because silence is the loudest goodbye, and indifference is the most brutal revenge. This isn't just about walking away. This is about reclaiming your power. The power they pretended you didn't have. The power they tried to drain from you. But here's what they failed to understand. A chosen one's power doesn't fade. It evolves. And now, they're stuck in the ruins of their own delusion while you rise. And now, to you, the one who finally walked away, the one who refused to be caged, this is your moment. Whether you've been with us from the start or just found your way to this space, know this: you are not alone. This is where the chosen ones who broke free come together. If you're ready to stand firm in your decision to never look back and to own the power they never wanted you to realize, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop the number 777 in the comments to mark the moment you chose yourself over them. And now, let's break it down step by step. Trust me, if you're truly one of the chosen, you'll feel it. The pull, the truth, the fire. Stay with me till the end, because by the time we're done, you'll never question your decision again. God's chosen ones, they never thought you'd leave, but it's done. Number 1, you were there but never seen. Have you ever felt like you were there, yet never truly seen? Perhaps the people in your life took your presence for granted, never truly appreciating the depth of what you offered. They may have never noticed how your soul dimmed, or how the weight of their expectations slowly suffocated you. In the end, they didn't lose you. They lost the privilege of having you. And now all they have left is the hollow echo of what they failed to appreciate. Do you ever wonder how people can be so blind to what's in front of them? How many times did you ask yourself, how much longer can I keep going like this? You weren't gone in an instant. No, you had been gone long before you physically walked away. You were just a shadow in the room, going through the motions, speaking only when expected. Can you remember when you stopped feeling seen, when your silence started to speak louder than your words. They mistook your patience for acceptance, your silence for submission. In the Bible, the prophet Elijah faced a similar situation when he hid in the cave, feeling unseen and abandoned. Despite his great deeds for God, Elijah was overwhelmed with despair, thinking he was the last faithful one. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." 1 Kings 19:14. Elijah felt invisible, yet God showed him that he was not alone, and he had a purpose. Like Elijah, you may have felt isolated, but your journey was leading to something greater, something only God could see. What if the truth is that your leaving wasn't sudden, but inevitable? Every silent goodbye you whispered to yourself, every moment of pretending to be happy when you weren't, all led to this moment. Could it be that they never truly saw you because they were too busy seeing only what they wanted from you? When something or someone is always there, they stop asking themselves whether that presence is cherished or whether it is taken for granted. Did they ever ask if you were happy? Did they care about your needs, or did they simply expect you to fulfill theirs without question? Remember, God chose the path of isolation for many of his servants. Like Jesus, who faced betrayal from the ones closest to him, Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." John 13:7. Sometimes we are called to walk alone to fulfill God's higher purpose for our lives. Can you see that your journey, though painful, is a part of something greater, just like the journey of these faithful servants? Perhaps you are staying out of habit, not love, out of duty, not belonging. Can you feel the difference now? It's painful to realize that you were giving of yourself, sacrificing for others, and yet your value was never truly recognized. But what if, in that realization, you find your true strength? What if leaving is not a betrayal of them, but an act of self-liberation, a refusal to deny your worth any longer? Think about someone like Maya Angelou, who once said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." Maya endured great hardship and adversity, yet she chose to rise, just as you are now choosing to rise above the circumstances that once bound you. Like Maya, you have realized that remaining in a place where you are not valued is a betrayal to your own soul. But here's the part that hits hardest. They thought they had all the time in the world. They thought you would always be there, always predictable, always willing to sacrifice. But they never saw the cracks forming. How many of us have had moments where we stayed, hoping things would change, only to realize that the change we needed was within ourselves? When you left, you didn't just walk away, you broke free. Like the artist who walks away from a canvas that's no longer inspiring, you left because you realized your worth wasn't in their hands. You might wonder, could they ever fill the space you left? Can they truly replace the one who gave without limits, the one who stayed despite the odds? The truth is, they can't. They may find others, but they will never find another like you. You were rare. You were the light that held them together in their darkest moments. As Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." Matthew 5:14. Your light was always there, shining brightly, but they never took the time to appreciate it. And now, as they sit in their regret, facing the emptiness you left behind, they must finally confront the truth. You were never just another face in the crowd. You were a chosen one, a presence that mattered. Now, it's time for you to step into your truth and own the power of your absence. Because the greatest gift you've given them is not the space you left, but the lesson they will never forget: to appreciate what they have before it's gone. Number 2, They drained your light, then cried in the darkness. Chosen one, they basked in your light, thinking it would never fade. They took without asking, consumed without noticing, and in the end they were left wondering, where did you go? But did they ever stop to think about what would happen when you no longer had anything left to give? Like the sun, your light once seemed infinite to them. It was a constant source of energy, always shining, always giving. But even the sun burns out when it gives too much without rest. Just like in the Bible where God said, "Let there be light," Genesis 1:3, He created light with purpose. But even that light must be respected and replenished. Can you imagine if the sun didn't get a break? It would burn out eventually, just as you did, when you gave without taking time to refuel yourself. They took and took from you, believing your light would never wane. You were the fire that kept them warm, the steady flame that guided them through life. But they never once stopped to consider what would happen when your light dimmed. They never asked if you were okay. They simply expected you to keep shining. How many times have you given so much of yourself only to be overlooked? How many times have you ignored your own needs, thinking your light would never go out? In the case of someone like Oprah Winfrey, a woman who has inspired millions, her light shone brightly for years, offering wisdom, support, and love to those in need. But even Oprah had to take a step back and protect her own energy. In an interview, she once said, "You have to put yourself first. You have to refuel and take care of yourself, or you will burn out." Did Oprah have to walk away from people who drained her? Perhaps. But she understood that her light could not shine if she didn't first take care of herself. And that's exactly what they never understood about you. Your light was never meant to be taken without care, and yet they took and took until you had nothing left. You gave without question, without hesitation, believing that your strength would somehow be enough. But light requires fuel, it requires respect, and it requires care. When these things were missing, your flame began to flicker, you began to dim, and they never noticed. Does this sound familiar? Have you ever felt like you were giving all of yourself, only to have others stand in your glow without ever checking if you were okay? As Maya Angelou once said, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I cannot be everything to everyone." Maya, a woman who gave so much of herself, understood the necessity of preserving her light. Like her, you had to make the difficult decision to protect your energy when others took it for granted. Now they sit in the cold, wondering where you've gone. They miss the clarity you brought to their lives, the way you helped them navigate their chaos. But let's be honest, what they miss is not you. They miss the comfort you provided. They miss the safety net that allowed them to continue avoiding their own problems. They miss the convenience of having you fix things that they refuse to address. But here's the truth, they cannot replace you. Your light was never something they could own, no matter how much they tried to consume it. It was a gift, one that you chose to share. And when they failed to appreciate it, when they failed to protect it, you took it back. Now they are left in the darkness, stumbling, trying to find something to fill the void you left. But there is no replacement, because you, like your light, were unique. In the end, they finally see your worth, but it's too late. You've walked away, and this time they will have to figure out how to navigate the world without the light you once provided. Will they ever learn to appreciate the light while it's shining? Or will they wait until it's gone to realize its value? Number 3, you shattered the cage they built for you. Have you ever felt like someone built a cage around you, but they didn't call it that? Instead, they wrapped it in the comforting words of love, loyalty, and duty. They convinced you that this cage was a place of safety, a place of protection. But what if, deep down, you realized that it was never about keeping you safe? What if it was about keeping you small, making sure you never outgrew the boundaries they set for you? What if the cage they built wasn't designed to help you, but to control you? You were never supposed to question the limits they set. They needed you to be predictable, manageable, and easy to control. You were meant to fit into their world neatly, without disrupting the delicate balance they had created. But, at some point, you began to feel it, didn't you? That tightness in your chest, that whisper in your mind saying, "This isn't right." What made you ignore it for so long? Maybe it was fear, maybe it was guilt, or maybe you just didn't think you had the strength to change things. But one day, something shifted. Could it have been a single moment of clarity, or was it the accumulation of countless little moments? Disrespect, dismissal, and the feeling of being unseen that made you finally wake up. Remember the story of Moses, who was raised in the royal house of Pharaoh, but knew deep down he wasn't meant to stay in the palace. When Moses grew up, he went to his own people and looked at their hard labor. Exodus 2:11. Moses saw the chains that bound his people, and he knew he was meant for more. He didn't fit in the palace. He was meant to free others. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Like Moses, once you saw the truth about the cage they built for you, you couldn't unsee it. And when you began to push against those walls, you grew stronger. You began to take up the space you were always meant to inhabit. But then came the panic. They saw you changing, growing, and refusing to be contained, and they hated it. Not because they loved you, but because they loved controlling you. Does this sound familiar? They tried to convince you that you were being selfish, ungrateful, even cruel. But let's be clear, you didn't leave them. You left the version of yourself they had confined. You left the silence, the smallness, the constant need for their approval. You left the cage, and now they can't follow you. Think about someone like Malala Yousafzai, who refused to remain silent even when faced with violent opposition. Malala's courage wasn't just about defying physical barriers. It was about breaking the chains that kept her from being her true self. Her journey wasn't easy, but she chose to rise above the cage others had tried to build around her. In the same way, you shattered your cage and reclaimed the power that was always yours. The bitter truth they now face: they can't follow you. They were never willing to grow, never willing to break their own chains. You did what they could never do. You freed yourself. Number 4. Their power over you was an illusion, and you broke it. Chosen one, do you ever wonder what real power looks like? It's not about control. Real power is about walking away and watching them fall apart without you. For so long, they played the game, wrapped their control in pretty words like concern, loyalty, and love. But what if that wasn't love? What if it was power disguised as care, a way to keep you bound to their rules, their expectations, their manipulation? Can you see now that every decision you made was quietly influenced? Every boundary you set was blurred just enough to keep you trapped in their world. In the Bible, we see the story of Pharaoh, who tried to control the Israelites, believing his power over them was absolute. But God showed Pharaoh the truth when he said, "Let my people go, so that they may worship me." Exodus 8:1. Pharaoh thought he had the power to keep the Israelites enslaved, but in reality, God was the one with ultimate power. The same can be said about the illusion they built around you. They thought they controlled you. But all along, the true power was within you. They believed they had you locked in, convinced that you would always seek their approval. They thought their words, their opinions, their guilt trips would always sway you. But do you realize the truth now? Their power only existed because you allowed it. The moment you realized that, it was over. The grip they had on you wasn't real. It was an illusion. Consider the example of Steve Jobs, who faced immense pressure from the people around him, but refused to let others control his vision. Jobs was known for his unyielding drive to create something revolutionary, even when others tried to hold him back. He didn't bend to the system, instead he redefined it. How many times have you bent, shrunk, and second-guessed yourself to fit into their world? Like Jobs, you chose to reclaim your vision, and, in doing so, broke free from the illusion they built. The Bible also speaks of how God's true power is beyond human manipulation. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. God sees through the illusions of this world, and he calls us to see through them too. Your departure wasn't born of anger or revenge. It was a quiet act of liberation. You left because you outgrew the lies they fed you, the manipulation, the guilt trips, and the mind games. You stopped bending, stopped shrinking, stopped questioning your worth. And that, in their eyes, was the most dangerous thing you could have done, because now, without you, they are powerless. But here's the harsh truth they have to face. Without you, their empire of control crumbled. They're scrambling now, lost in a world where you no longer play by their rules. They may ask themselves, how did this happen? But the answer is simple. They built their power on the illusion that you would never leave, and you just proved them wrong. Number 5. The black hole they can't escape. Have you ever felt like your absence didn't just leave a gap, but created a void so deep that nothing could fill it? It's not just a loss they can move on from, is it? When you left, it wasn't just a simple goodbye. It was a rupture, a tear in the fabric of their world, a kind of absence that doesn't fade with time. It lingers, echoes, and haunts. They thought they could replace you, patch up the gap with someone else. But some spaces, some roles, are irreplaceable. What if, deep down, you were more than just a person in their life? What if you were the glue, the steady force that kept everything from crumbling? You brought order to their chaos, light into their dull existence. You were the quiet foundation, the overlooked constant. But now, that foundation is gone. How many times did they overlook you, assuming you'd always be there? Like air, unnoticed until it's missing. Like gravity, never questioned until the fall. They took for granted that you'd always show up, no matter how much they ignored you, used you, or overlooked you. But now, they're choking on the emptiness. Your absence is loud. Can you feel the silence they now sit in? It rings in every missed mistake they can't fix, in every hollow moment where something just feels wrong. They try to drown it out with distractions, with substitutes, with empty reassurances. But they won't find peace. Deep down, they know the truth. They lost something irreplaceable. It's not just that they miss you, they miss the version of their life that worked because of you. They miss the moments that were easier because you carried the weight, the days that felt smoother because you kept things together. Consider the story of Job from the Bible. Job was a man who had everything, yet when he lost it all, he realized that the things he thought were unshakable could be taken away. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Job 1:21. Just as Job had everything taken from him, they too lost the foundation that held their lives together. Now they are left with the bitter realization that the very thing they took for granted was the thing keeping their world from falling apart. The truth is, they didn't realize the magnitude of what they had until it was gone. And now they're left with a wound, a gap so deep it won't heal. They'll be forced to live with it, day after day, as a constant reminder of what they lost when they let you go. Number 6, they fed off your strength. Now they're starving. Have you ever given so much of yourself only for others to see your strength as something to be used rather than something to be protected? They didn't love you. They loved the way you held their world together while yours was falling apart. They fed off your resilience, believing it was endless, that you were some unshakable force put in their life to absorb every storm they refused to face. But did they ever stop to ask who was holding you up? You made it look effortless, didn't you? You carried their burdens with a calm face, swallowed your own struggles in silence, and kept everything running smoothly, no matter how much it drained you. But they mistook your endurance for duty, your patience for permission. They assumed your strength was something they could use rather than something you needed to protect. Resilience isn't infinite, is it? It isn't a well that never runs dry. In the Bible, Paul speaks of how he learned to rely on God's strength rather than his own. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." 2 Corinthians 12:9. Like Paul, you gave and you gave until there was nothing left. You thought your strength was endless, but you learned that it wasn't. And when you finally chose yourself over them, when you walked away, they didn't just lose a person, they lost their safety net. Now the cracks are showing. The weight of their dysfunction is no longer hidden beneath your quiet sacrifices. Can you imagine how they must feel, realizing that they relied on you to keep everything together? The same people who dismissed your struggles now find themselves gasping for air, drowning in the chaos you once managed for them. They thought they could depend on you forever, didn't they? They thought you would always be there, no matter how little they gave in return. They never imagined a world where they'd have to stand on their own. But now they have no choice. They are finally being forced to deal with their own wreckage, the one you shielded them from for far too long. Let them panic, let them struggle. For the first time, they're seeing life without the one person who held it all together. And this time, you're not coming back to save them. Number 7, they can copy you, but they can't replace you. Chosen one, a copy will always fade, but the original remains untouchable. They thought they could replace you. They thought someone else could step into the space you left, that your presence was just another role to be played, another script to be followed. But they were wrong, dead wrong. When you left, you didn't just take your body, you took the one thing they could never recreate, your authenticity. Can you remember the moments when they tried to mimic your words or repeat your actions, thinking they could fill the void you left? But what they're learning now the hard way is that authenticity isn't something you can fake, rent, or steal. It's either in you or it's not, and that's where they're drowning. In the Bible, Jesus taught us that being authentic in our relationship with God is not about outward appearances, but about sincerity and truth. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the spirit and in truth. John 4:24. This verse reminds us that what is real cannot be imitated. Like the worship God desires, your authenticity is something that cannot be replicated by mere imitation. They built their world on illusions, on pretending, on pleasing others, on bending to fit whatever mold made them feel accepted. But you were different. You spoke what you meant, and you meant what you spoke. You saw things others ignored. You refused to be anything but yourself. And that scared them, that challenged them. Instead of rising to meet your authenticity, they chose to take from you. Now that you're gone, the cracks in their world are showing. Can you feel it? The forced laughter, the shallow conversations, the empty gestures, they're all hollow. They're struggling now, scrambling to fill the gaps with distractions, with stand-ins. with anything that numbs the realization creeping into their minds. No matter how hard they try, they can't recreate what made you special. What you brought wasn't just energy, it was depth. And that can't be copied. Think about someone like Princess Diana, who had a presence that could never be replaced. Despite the countless tributes and imitators, no one could ever replicate her unique combination of compassion and authenticity. Just like Diana, your presence was one of a kind. The way you connected, the way you made others feel seen, valued, and understood. It wasn't something that could simply be replaced by someone else. You brought something irreplaceable into their world. And the worst part, they know it. They might try to act unbothered, surround themselves with noise to drown out the silence your absence left behind, but deep down, they feel it. They feel the void where your authenticity used to be. The raw, unfiltered realness that made everything around you matter. No matter how much they pretend, that truth will haunt them. Because at the end of the day, they didn't lose just a person. They lost the only real thing they had. Number 8, our absence is their mirror, and they can't look away. Have you ever wondered what happens when you walk away from someone who never expected you to leave? It's not just that you're gone, it's that your absence becomes a mirror, forcing them to face the parts of themselves they never wanted to see. The cruelest truth is not being abandoned. It's realizing that you were the reason someone left. Can you feel the weight of that realization? That moment when they see the cracks they ignored for so long, the ones you were holding together. Your departure wasn't just a loss to them, it was a brutal awakening. They thought they could handle life without you, didn't they? They assumed your presence was just a given, something that would always be there. You were the one who cleaned up their messes, smoothed over their mistakes, and held up their fragile world while they took you for granted. But the second you walked away, everything shifted. Now, they're left staring at the cracks, the flaws they tried to cover up with distractions, the issues they refused to face. Without you, they can no longer hide from the truth. Think of the story of King David, who once had everything, but lost it all when he took his relationships and blessings for granted. In 2 Samuel 12:7, the prophet Nathan says, "You are the man," when confronting David's sins. For David, the truth was a mirror he couldn't escape. Similarly, when you left, they were forced to face the reality of their own actions, their neglect, their selfishness. They relied on your strength to mask their own weakness, used your wisdom to cover their poor decisions, and depended on your kindness to excuse their flaws. As long as you were there, they could deflect, distract, and pretend. But now the silence screams. The empty space you left behind exposes everything. Your absence isn't just felt, it's visible. It's a glaring truth they can't ignore. Without you, the reality of who they are is undeniable. Do you see it? The questions they're forced to ask. Why didn't I appreciate them when I had the chance? Why did I push them so far that they had no choice but to leave? But the hardest question of all is this: what does it say about me that someone so loyal, so giving, so rare, decided I wasn't worth staying for? This thought is poison, isn't it? Because it's one thing to be abandoned, it's another to realize you earned it. You were their shield, the buffer between them and their own flaws. And now, with no one left to cover their mistakes, their reflection is unforgiving. The toxic cycles they thought they could run forever are now laid bare. The manipulation they used to control you is useless. The illusion of power they thought they had over you is gone. Consider the example of someone like Whitney Houston, whose personal struggles were often hidden behind her public persona. Throughout her career, she was known for her incredible voice and the love fans had for her. But the cracks in her personal life became undeniable. When Whitney left the spotlight, people were forced to confront the challenges she faced, many of which were masked for years by her fame and success. Her absence left a void, and the world was forced to face the hard truth about her struggles. In the same way, your absence forced them to see what they had been ignoring, their own flaws and missed opportunities. In this moment, they're forced to confront the truth. They lost the best thing they had, and the worst part, it's too late to fix any of it. The damage is done. As they sit with the weight of your absence, they realize, day by day, the unshakable truth. They were the reason you left. Number 9. They gambled on your guilt and lost everything. Chosen one, they didn't need force or harsh words. They used something subtler, more insidious: guilt. They built their control around the idea that you would always feel obligated to stay, to keep giving, to keep sacrificing, even at the expense of your own well-being. They counted on the fact that no matter how much they drained you, you'd never have the heart to leave. How could they believe this? What made them think that you would never walk away? They played their roles well, making you feel like walking away was selfish, like choosing yourself was somehow a betrayal of everything you stood for. Do you remember the emotional pressure? It wasn't loud or obvious, but quiet and calculated. Like a contract you never signed but were always expected to uphold. How many times did you feel like your needs were secondary, like your desires and boundaries didn't matter? Were you made to believe that love, friendship, or loyalty meant putting yourself last? For a while it worked, didn't it? You second-guessed yourself. You stayed when you should have left. You gave when you had nothing left to give. The emotional burden was heavy, but you carried it because you thought love meant sacrifice. You thought loyalty meant enduring, even when it drained you, even when it suffocated you. But then something shifted. Have you ever had that one moment of clarity, that sharp realization that cut through all the noise? When did you realize that the only person you were betraying was yourself? How did it feel when you saw the truth for what it was? You saw that the guilt they used against you wasn't love. It was manipulation. It wasn't a bond. It was a leash. They had been using your own sense of duty against you, keeping you small, keeping you available, keeping you under their control. And once you understood that, everything changed. How did it feel when you walked away without hesitation, no looking back, no apologies? That moment, was it liberating for you? That is what broke them. Not just because you were gone, but because they lost the grip they thought they had on you. They were convinced that you would never be able to leave without guilt eating you alive, without questioning whether you were doing the right thing. But you proved them wrong. They weren't prepared for you to wake up and realize that loyalty without reciprocity is nothing more than self-destruction. What do you think that realization did to them? How did they react when they saw you choosing yourself over the guilt they imposed on you? In many ways, this resonates with the story of Lady Gaga, who, despite the pressure and expectations surrounding her fame, made the bold decision to put her mental health first. When she faced intense scrutiny and toxic relationships, she realized that she had to prioritize her own well-being over the guilt others tried to manipulate her with. Lady Gaga understood the importance of freeing herself from the chains of guilt that were controlling her decisions, and in doing so, she became an example of someone choosing authenticity and self-care. Have you ever been in a similar situation where you had to choose your own peace over the chaos someone else tried to drag you into? Now, they sit there, replaying everything over and over in their minds, trying to make sense of how you slipped through their fingers. How did they lose you? How did their grip on you slip away so easily? But they failed to see the truth. They never had you in the first place. All they had was your guilt, your compassion, and your willingness to sacrifice. What do you think they missed? What do you think they failed to understand? Those were the tools they used to control you, to keep you in their web. But now they realize that without those tools, they had nothing. In Romans 8:1, we are reminded, "Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." This verse speaks to the freedom you found when you let go of their control. Guilt is a chain, and you broke free from it. You realized that you weren't betraying anyone but yourself by walking away. You were finally choosing yourself, and that was the most powerful thing you could do. How does it feel to know that you've freed yourself from that kind of control? In Galatians 5:1, it's written, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." This verse speaks to the liberation you've experienced. They had kept you enslaved in guilt, using it as a tool to control your decisions, your actions, and your sense of self-worth. But now you've been set free. You no longer carry the weight of their manipulation. You're no longer bound by the guilt that once held you hostage. How does it feel to know you are free from all of that? And as they try to piece their lives back together, filling the void with distractions and excuses, they will come to one inevitable realization. They lost everything, not because you walked away, but because they gambled on your guilt. And they lost. They thought they could keep you in place, keep you at their mercy, but the moment you stopped feeling guilty for choosing yourself, you took away their last weapon. What do you think they will do now that they no longer have that control? What do you think the future holds for them now that their manipulation no longer works? Number 10. You were their comfort. Now you're their wake-up call. Have you ever noticed how some people only learn their lessons through pain? Some lessons are learned in whispers, subtle reminders that gently nudge us in the right direction. But others, they are learned in the deafening silence of someone who's never coming back. Have you ever wondered why it took so long for them to understand the value of what they had? Was it the arrogance, the neglect, or the assumption that you'd always be there to clean up their mess? They thought they had time to push you aside, time to take you for granted, time to play their mind games and assume you'd always be there, forgiving, sacrificing, and putting yourself last. But time ran out. Your departure wasn't just a goodbye, it wasn't just a simple, "I'm leaving." It was a siren blasting through their delusions, a wrecking ball slamming into their false sense of security. Did they ever realize they were running out of time? Or did they think you'd always wait, always return? In the Bible, we see this idea echoed in Proverbs 29:1. Whoever remains stiff-necked after many rebukes will suddenly be destroyed without remedy. There's a point where patience and grace can no longer hold the weight of neglect. Just like the verse says, they had countless opportunities to change, to appreciate you, but they pushed it too far. And now, with your silence, they are facing the consequences of their arrogance. They never imagined a world where you weren't waiting in the background, always ready to forgive, always willing to sacrifice. They took and took, assuming you'd always have more to give. They dismissed your pain, brushed aside your needs, and thought they could keep you tied to them, to bend to their will forever. But what did they miss? They never realized that one day you would break free. Now, your silence is their loudest punishment. Can you feel the weight of that silence? They look around and all they feel is the emptiness where you used to be. They try to reach for you, but you're gone. The comfort of knowing you'd always return, gone. The certainty that they could always get one more chance, gone. The belief that you needed them more than they needed you, completely shattered. Do you think they even see it? How they built a world based on their own assumptions, and now that world is falling apart. Consider someone like Oprah Winfrey who, after years of putting others first, learned that she had to prioritize herself to continue to thrive. Oprah had to let go of relationships and situations that no longer served her. And in doing so, she faced a painful realization about what true self-care and boundaries meant. Like Oprah, you've learned that sometimes leaving is the only way to show others the gravity of their actions. Your departure was a wake-up call for them, but now, like Oprah, you've moved on. They can try to distract themselves, fill their time with noise, surround themselves with temporary replacements, but nothing feels the same. Because you weren't just another person in their life. You were the anchor, the balance, the force that made things work. Your presence was the glue, holding everything together. And now they have to sit in the wreckage of their own making. Have you ever realized that they're now facing the mess they created? They can't ignore it anymore. What stings the most for them? They did this to themselves. They had something rare, something extraordinary, and they let it slip through their fingers. But you're done being their lesson. You've learned what you needed to learn, and now you're free. Let them wake up alone, because you're never looking back. Number 11. You were the fire in their grey world. Chosen one, what is it like to wake up and understand that you lost the very spark that made everything seem meaningful? They surrounded themselves with the average, the predictable, the safe. Do you think they ever realized how dull their existence had become until you walked in? They lived in a world where everything stayed the same and nothing ever changed. But then you came into their orbit, and suddenly everything was different. You weren't just another person in their life. You were the exception. You were the force of nature that disrupted their comfort zone, the fire that exposed the cracks in their mediocrity. Have you ever realized how much your presence challenged them? Without even trying, you shook their world. Your energy, your ambition, your authenticity stood in stark contrast to the stagnant routine they had built around themselves. Do you think they ever recognized how much you made them feel? Something real, something alive, that they were never brave enough to chase on their own. In Matthew 5:14, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." You were that light in their life, a light they could see but never quite understood. You reminded them without saying a word that life is more than just existing. It's about being alive, about being extraordinary. And that terrified them. Because the truth is, people like them don't want to rise. They want to remain. They crave stability, even if it means settling for less. They talk about greatness, but refuse to do the work to achieve it. And you were living proof of what was possible. You weren't just a presence in their life. You were a mirror reflecting everything they could be, if only they had the courage to try. How often do we see people who settle for mediocrity because the fear of change is too great? But you refused to settle. Instead of rising to meet you, they resented you. Why? Because it's easier to hate the fire than admit you're afraid of burning. They liked keeping you close because it made them feel like they had access to something greater. But deep down, they knew they would never match your hunger, your drive, your relentless need to evolve. Do you think they understood the weight of your ambition, the power in your refusal to conform? Or did they only see it as a threat to their own fragile comfort? Like Albert Einstein, who was often seen as an outsider for his unconventional ideas, you didn't fit into the predictable mold they created. Einstein once said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." And yet, that's exactly what they wanted, to stay in their comfortable, predictable world while expecting you to remain the same. But you couldn't stay confined, just like Einstein couldn't stay in the shadow of conventional thinking. You were meant for more, and that made them uncomfortable. So they did what people like them always do. They tried to dim you. They tried to contain you, make you smaller, so they wouldn't have to grow. What do you think that says about them? Why is it that people fear change, especially when it comes from someone close to them? They wanted you to remain in their orbit, to stay in their predictable world, and they didn't want to be reminded that greatness was possible. Now that you're gone, the illusion is shattered. They thought they could slip back into their routine, their comfortable mediocrity, their safe little world. But something is missing now, something they can't replace. What do you think they miss the most? The space you once filled is now a gaping hole, a reminder of everything they ignored, everything they could have been, and everything they will never become. They didn't just lose you, they lost their only chance at more. The worst part, they know it. Every day without you is a painful reminder of how they had something extraordinary in their hands and let it slip away. Do you think they'll ever understand what they lost, or will they simply be haunted by the truth that they were too afraid to rise to meet you? Number 12, they wanted to own you, not free you. Have you ever realized that someone didn't truly love you? They just loved controlling you. What happens when they treat you not as an individual, but as an object, something to be molded and shaped to fit their needs? They never valued you the way you deserved. Instead, they valued owning you. You weren't a person to them. You were a piece in their puzzle, a character in their carefully crafted story. Your presence made their life easier. Your energy kept their world spinning. But your freedom, your right to choose, that was never part of the deal. They never thought you would leave, did they? To them, you were never meant to walk away. You were supposed to stay exactly where they placed you, bending, adjusting, shrinking to fit their expectations. Have you ever felt like your worth was only measured by how much you could give, how much you could adjust, and how much you could tolerate? They mistook your kindness for obedience, your patience for permanence. You being there was their comfort, their stability, their certainty. And so, they never imagined a version of life where you were no longer at their command. But here's the truth they never understood. You were never meant to be owned for too long. Romans 6:16 reminds us, "Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey? Whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness." The moment they started treating you like something to control, they lost sight of the truth. You are not meant to be anyone's possession. Your identity was never theirs to mold, but they operated under the illusion that you would always prioritize their wants over your own. They thought your boundaries were just suggestions, that your loyalty meant self-abandonment. They convinced themselves that you were flexible enough to fit into their version of who you should be. And they liked it that way, because as long as you played along, they never had to face the truth of their own selfishness. You see, they never truly respected you. They mistook your compliance for commitment, your silence for acceptance, and your endless giving for contentment. But when you broke free, when you walked away, everything changed. Because your leaving wasn't just about walking away, it was about rejecting the cage they put you in. You ripped up the unspoken contract that said you had to give, that you had to tolerate, that you had to stay small so they could feel big. Can you imagine the moment you realized your worth was so much greater than the role they tried to force you into? How did it feel to step into your freedom, knowing you were finally living for yourself? Consider the story of Maya Angelou, who, despite facing tremendous adversity in her life, refused to let anyone define her or control her narrative. She famously said, "I am a human being. Nothing human is alien to me." Maya never allowed anyone to limit her, to own her, or mold her into something less than she was. Just like her, you walked away from the cage, rejecting the idea that you existed only to serve someone else's needs. And in doing so, you found your true self. When you walked out, you took something with you, the power they thought they had over you. And what does that do to someone who thought they controlled you? They were left with a brutal truth. The version of you they loved never even existed. It was a projection, a construct they built in their mind. The real you, the one who refuses to be controlled, the one who walks away without looking back, that's the you they never wanted to see. Do you think they understand now? They don't grieve your absence. They grieve the loss of control, the loss of ownership, the loss of their ability to shape you to fit their needs. And that, losing the ability to control someone as extraordinary as you, that is what haunts them the most. Number 13. You left without begging, and that terrifies them. Have you ever realized that sometimes the loudest message is the one delivered in silence? Some doors don't slam shut, they close quietly, without a sound. The Bible says in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. This verse speaks to the importance of choosing what we allow to take root in our lives. And sometimes that means walking away when something no longer serves us. They expected a scene, didn't they? They thought you'd cry, beg, or leave them with one final plea for validation. But instead, you did the one thing they never prepared for. You simply walked away. No apologies, no explanations. Just a quiet, unshakable decision that left them standing in the wreckage of their own illusion. They thought they had time to keep you under their control, time to manipulate, to guilt, to convince you to stay just a little longer. But what they failed to understand is that your patience was never weakness. It was a countdown. And when the final second ran out, you left without a trace of hesitation. Your departure wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making a statement. It was about something much bigger, self-respect. When you know your worth, you don't need permission to leave. You don't ask for their understanding because you already understand yourself. You don't lower yourself for people who never saw your value in the first place. How does it feel when you realize that your worth doesn't require anyone's approval? Consider Beyoncé, who after enduring personal and public struggles, finally found the courage to reclaim her narrative and prioritize her well-being. Like her, you walked away not for vengeance but for self-preservation. You realized that your value wasn't tied to anyone else's validation, and you knew that staying wasn't an option anymore. Now, they are haunted by the finality of it all, because for the first time, they are realizing that their power over you was never real. It was an illusion, one that only worked because you allowed it. The moment you chose yourself, the entire game collapsed. They called you selfish. They said you were heartless. But what they really mean is, how dare you choose yourself over us? But the truth is, they were never afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing control over you. And now that they have, they are left with nothing but the mess they created. Your silence, it's the loudest thing they've ever heard. It's in every empty moment, every unfinished conversation, every reminder that the person they once relied on is never coming back. Can they truly face the emptiness you left behind, knowing it's a void filled with every truth they refuse to face? They thought they were the ones in control. They thought you needed them. But now they're realizing, in something much harder to swallow, that you were the one holding everything together. And now that you're gone, their world is unraveling piece by piece. The truth they never wanted to face is now staring them in the face. They had the extraordinary in their hands and let it slip away. And you're finally free. Free to be everything they never let you be. Free to build a life where you don't have to shrink to fit someone else's small world. Free to become unstoppable. Just like that, it's over. Not just your presence in their life, but their illusion of control, their comfort in knowing you'd always be there. Do you ever wonder if they'll ever realize the magnitude of your absence? Or will they continue to be haunted by the illusion that they could control you? In Isaiah 41:10, God promises, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." You walked away with the strength of knowing you were not alone. It wasn't just about leaving them, it was about finding your true strength, and now you are free to walk into your own purpose unapologetically. Beloved chosen one, if this message has resonated with you, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your journey. You are not just someone who walks through life, you are someone chosen for greatness. This journey of choosing yourself, of walking away from the things that no longer serve you, is a powerful testimony of your strength and resilience. In this life, the chosen ones are often called to step away from the things that hold them back, to break free from cycles of manipulation, guilt, and control. When others expect you to stay small, you rise. When they fail to see your worth, you choose to walk away, not for revenge, but for the sacred honor of your own self-respect. And in that moment of choosing yourself, you break free and step into your divine purpose. This is the essence of being God's chosen ones, not merely surviving, but rising and thriving, empowered by the love and strength that flows through you. If this message spoke to your soul, I invite you to hit that like button, subscribe, and if you feel moved, consider supporting us through Super Thanks to mark the moment you chose yourself. Remember, whether you choose to donate or not, your presence and support are deeply appreciated. Your journey and your empowerment mean the world to us. May you continue to rise, not just for yourself, but for the others who need to see that we, the chosen ones, don't just survive. We rise. We stand tall in our truth and walk into our destiny. May you walk with the strength of knowing you are loved, valued, and chosen by the divine. Keep shining, keep rising, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. You are a beacon of hope, and the world needs your light. Blessings to you, beloved chosen one.